So, thank you everybody for tuning in today and welcome everybody to today's webinar with the topic, is your HR department ready for the GDPR coming 25th of May? This webinar is hosted by Skilled. For those who don't know Skilled yet, Skilled is a Luxembourgish SaaS company offering a software to digitalize and automatize your recruitment. And we aim to give the best possible experience to candidates with an option to add personality evaluation and video interview. And we want to provide all the necessary tools for recruiters to have a high quality, efficient and fast hiring. Who am I? My name is Erik Lehmeyer. I'm an account executive here at Skilled Luxembourg, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's webinar. And I have with me today Jose Sanchez, our customer success manager from Skilled Belgium, who is going to present you a general overview of the GDPR and especially its implications for recruitment. I just want to mention up front that we both are no lawyers and that our knowledge and expertise about the GDPR comes from research, coaching and formation we had with our company during the last year in preparation of the GDPR and the experiences that we have on a daily basis with our clients and prospects. So we won't go too much into legal detail today, but we want to give you a generic, useful and practical overview of the topic and the consequences for your recruitment. So on the right side of your screen, you should see a chat box with different sections, and in the Q&A chat, you can ask questions during the entire webinar. It's important to ask those questions in the Q&A part, not in the direct chat. So we will get those questions. All the questions will be private, so don't be afraid of asking questions at any time. We will collect them during the webinar, and we will pick some of the most relevant questions at the end to answer them. If your question should not be answered at the end, we will reach out to you at a later stage and provide you with an answer. So without further ado, now I will give the word to my colleague, Jose Sanchez, who's going to present you the topic. Thank you for tuning in.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric, for your warm introduction. My name is Jose, and I'm working as a customer success manager here at Skilled. I'm actually based on the Brussels office, so I'm actually very happy that we can communicate on this topic on the GDPR through a webinar with Eric in a different place and you sitting on your office or at home. So I'm very happy to be here with you today. Welcome. Now what I'm going to do, I'll share my screen with you. So hopefully all of you will be able to see my screen and the presentation that we have prepared for you. So GDPR 2018, are you ready? Let's go. Okay, so very quickly, I'll present the agenda. The first point that I'll cover is a general introduction of GDPR. So a definition of what it is, why is it coming? And then lately, we will dive more into GDPR within recruitment, which is actually the reason why we're here today. So within GDPR in recruitment, we will check at the main implications. So what things you need to change to be compliant. Then we will show what are the penalties and the consequences for not complying with the GDPR. And then we will go through the things that you need to do or change in your company concerning the recruitment aspect to be compliant. As a third step, we will give you a recommendation to use a compliant tool. And when taking your decision of what tool or what possibilities you might take in the future, what are the questions that you should ask yourself when choosing the tool? And then the fourth step, since at Skilled we are GDPR compliant, we would love to show you an example of how a recruitment tool like us complies with it, so you have a clear view and idea on how to be in line with this new regulation. And as Eric mentioned, you can already post some questions that you might have on the way while I'm presenting, and we will go over them in the end through the Q&A section. Okay, so let's start. The first point, what is GDPR and why is it coming? So that's a very broad definition. That's the General Data Protection Regulation. And it's been settled and agreed by the European Parliament, the Council of the European Union, and the European Commission already 1 year ago. And the main goal is to strengthen and they unify the data protections of all the data subjects, so all the individuals and users within the European Union. So what's one of the main reasons why this GDPR is coming? In our specific case within recruitment and technology, it's mainly because of digitalization. What we've seen over the past 10 years, and obviously on the future ahead coming, is that nowadays we're using more and more applications, more and more tools and softwares. So we are sharing as consumers and the users a lot of data with the companies. And on the other hand, we also don't know exactly what's happening with our data. So we're not really aware of what is the company doing with it. Are they using it for the right purpose? Who are they sharing it with? At the end of the day, the European Union has the goal to protect us as citizens of the Union. And obviously, this legislation is quite strict and strong for the companies to respect it. So it's going to come on the 25th of May, it starts. So that means that any company that is processing the EU citizens' data has to obey with these new rules for both controlling and processing the information, okay? So here we have to make a strong distinction between data controllers and data processors. So data controllers are any company that is gathering information for any purpose, like in your case, for example, and data processors are companies or systems like us, a recruitment software that basically processes the information of the candidates so that you can collect it and then make your best decisions in recruitment. So we both have to comply with this regulation, and it's including all the industries, including as well HR and recruitment. Okay, so we will dive into the next step, which is GDPR in recruitment. What are the main implications? So we have 6 points gathered here. The first point is that the candidate data must be collected and processed with specified, explicit, and legitimate interest. This means that when a candidate from the 25th of May onwards applies to your company, you need to show him, you need to let him know in your privacy policy when applying that the data will only be collected for recruitment process for that position. Therefore, there cannot be all other goals as to inflate, for example, your database or your pipeline of candidates for future purposes, but it needs to be just for that specific job. Okay, so for that reason, you need to have also a candidate consent to process sensitive data. So it's clear that now in the European Union, it is allowed. You can ask questions such as disability information, cultural info, genetic, gender, age information. It's fine as long as you get the consent from the candidate to do so. So therefore, you have an obligation to be transparent in the process of this candidate data. And here we go to a big important point, which is a privacy policy. Every candidate must be able to access your privacy policy when applying, and they should be able to read all your conditions and how and with which purpose you're going to treat the information. So you can either build your own privacy policy, or you can use an ATS or any system that already does that for you. So that's up to you to choose. Then the fourth step, or the fourth implication, is that you need to assume responsibility for compliance with GDPR. So you need to be able to demonstrate to your candidate that either you or your data processor, meaning your system, is compliant. And if your provider fails at doing this, then also your company is accountable as well. So you need to be very responsible in this topic. Make sure that your providers, not only in recruitment, also in the other sectors, are accountable with GDPR. Also, one of the key points of GDPR in recruitment happening now, it's that the applicants, they now have the right to be deleted. So they can ask you and contact your recruitment department at any time to delete their full data from the system. And you, as a company, you are obliged to do so, and you have to remove their profile with a max of 30 days from the request. At the same time, at the same moment that they also can ask you to have the right to be forgotten, they can also hold the right to see their data and ask for rectification. Rectification means modification of their data. So if a candidate, after a few months, contacts you and asks you, I would love to see my CV I would love to see the results of my personality assessment. You have to be able to provide them this information at the right format. And if they want to modify certain information from what they have provided, they should be able to do so as well. And you have a maximum of 30 days to do so from the moment the person contacts you. Okay, so those were the main 6 hot topics that will affect recruitment and your way of working. Now, there are certain penalties and consequences that have been stipulated by the European Union in this sense. Honestly, this is what it's stated in the directive. We don't know how harsh they're going to be, when they're going to start exactly with investigations, but what is clear is that the fines go up to 20 million or 4% of the worldwide annual revenue of your company from the previous financial years. And that's already the fine that companies will have to pay if they infringe the basic principles of processing of data. So the 6 topics that we've covered right before, those are the basic principles. So for already not complying with these ones, you can get a big penalty. And also, the second point, not infringing the data subject rights. So the data subject rights are the rights for the candidates to be forgotten, to be deleted, to modify their information, to access their information. If the company is not able to respect that, also big penalties are applied in this sense. Okay, so that is going to lead us to the next part of the presentation, which is, so what do you need to change and do in your company or in your recruitment department from now on? So we have analyzed 6 main topics, from speaking with lawyers, with people within the HR industry. And the first one is that you need to start analyzing your recruitment data. So ask yourself that first question. What info are we currently requesting from our candidates when they apply? The name, the email address, gender, age, whatever information you're collecting from them, you have to show that it has a legitimate interest. Are we using this data for a recruitment purpose only? Or what is the purpose at the end of the day? So you need to make sure that this data that it's collected, it's actually well reasoned enough for the purpose of recruitment. Also, where are we storing the collected data? Where are we going to process it? Are we using an Excel file to, let's say, check our candidates and process their data? Or are we using an ATS, an automated system? Those are 2 questions, 2 decisions to make. Basically, if you use an Excel file, then all the actions to be GDPR compliant, you'll have to do them manually. If you use an ATS, most likely the recruitment software system will do it for you automatically. So also, how is the data shared among the company? Who is going to view it? How is it going to be processed afterwards? And also, what is the process that we use to delete or modify candidate data when we are requested to do so? So it's very important that you start analyzing these first questions. And then the second step is to update your privacy policy. Okay, so it's very important that it's accessible to the candidates. And as we mentioned before, in your privacy policy, you need to make sure that the data is used for a purpose of recruitment, and that you mention with whom it will be shared, where it's going to be stored, either on an Excel file or on your ATS recruitment software. How long will the data be stored? And also you need to mention the candidates that they have the right to be forgotten, to rectify or access this data. As a third step, you need to be ready to update your rejection emails. So after you have concluded the recruitment process for a specific position, all the candidates that you're not going to hire, you should let them know that they have not been chosen for the position, but also you need to ask them if they want to still remain in your database for future recruitment processes. So you need to ask this question and then let them choose. The fourth step, you need to inform your candidates always, either when you're sourcing data, so when you're going through LinkedIn to find them, or when you're receiving external data. So here, it's 2 main distinctions. The first one is that if you receive a CV from, let's say, networking event, a job fair, from your recruitment agency that you're already using, that is providing you with CVs, before you process this data or you put it into your system, you need to ask your candidates to sign a form that it's actually providing them with a privacy policy, or you need to make the candidates upload their CV in your system by themselves. So you need to have a consent of the privacy policy, and because the candidates need to be aware that they are being processed within your system. On the other hand, if you're sourcing candidates on a public available source, like for example, LinkedIn, that's fine. You can save this CV on your database. You don't need to ask for a consent, mainly because if someone already puts his CV on a LinkedIn profile, it's already accepting that that information can be processed by anyone. But after you are finished with your recruitment process for a specific position, you need to inform the candidates within a max of 30 days about the status of the application and whether they want to remain within your database. The fifth step, you have to review your database, your current and old database. Let's say you have an old list of candidates from already 5 years ago. You need to make sure that the candidates that are unlikely to be qualified and who are old there in the system, you need to make sure to contact them and to either delete them directly yourself or ask them for permission if they want to stay more time. And the sixth step is you need to be prepared to grant the candidate requests, meaning when the candidate requests you to delete, to rectify, or to access the information, you need to be prepared by the 25th of May to see, okay, in which format are we going to provide the candidate his CV, his data, his personality assessment? How are we going to extract this data from the database? You need to be ready to delete this data when that person asks, immediately when they request to do so. You need to be able to spot this candidate in your database and immediately delete from the system. That leads us to the third point of the presentation, which is the recommendation to use a compliant tool. So obviously, if you don't want to do all this work manually by yourself, in any sector, whether it's HR, marketing, sales, it's very important to use a tool that automatizes this process. So, and on your decision to go over this tool that you decide for, we recommend you to ask and make sure that this tool complies with the next 6 points. Okay, so the first point that you need to make sure that they comply with, with the data processing agreement update. Make sure that the tool you choose, they have an updated privacy policy that meets the requirements of the GDPR and data protection. Second of all, you need to make sure they are in line with the third-party vendor's contract review. So that means that the external vendors of that data processor are also GDPR ready. So let's say you're going to go for a tool that has connectors. So for example, they use a personality assessment or some video interviews that are provided by other companies outside. You need to make sure as well that these vendors of your data processor also are GDPR compliant. So you need to take care of these questions. Also, you need to make sure that if your provider has external vendors that are outside the European Union, like for example, in the US, you need to make sure that they are in line with the international data transfer certification, so that those external vendors have the EU-US privacy shield in case that vendor is from the US. If it's from Asia, then it would be a different privacy shield, EU-Asia, for example. The fourth step to take into account when choosing your tool, it's you need to make sure that there is that they are in line with the extended rights of individuals, so that the tool allows for sure the candidates to request data access, data deletion, and data rectification, as we mentioned before. You need to make sure that it's in line with data processing records, so that the tool is able to identify immediately and automatically the candidate when he requests this information to be deleted, and that it's able to identify it and process it automatically from the system itself. And as the last point, you need to make sure that the tool that you choose is in line with the data breach notification. So in the event of a data breach, if there is a hacking, if some information leaks away from the system that you will be using, you need to make sure that your vendor basically is able to inform the EU authorities and the citizens affected within less than 72 hours. Okay, so those are the 6 main principles. No worries, we will share that after the presentation, and we will share that with you. But so Before we finish, I will very briefly give the example as we promised at the beginning from Skilled, how we do it. So like this, you get a clear example, all right? So at Skilled, we are a fully GDPR compliant solution. How do we do it? Candidates, when they apply via our system to all our clients, they must first give a consent before submitting the application, okay? So they can easily access the privacy policy and read all the terms and conditions and make sure that every article of the new GDPR regulations is respected. Also, Skilled, we are keeping the personal data of each applicant for 12 months from the moment the person has applied. So 12 months after the person applies for within the Skilled software, we already automatically do it for our clients, that we ask the candidates, hey, would you still like to remain in the database, yes or no? So we do this automatically for all the clients. That means that they don't have to do this manually. So all the work that I have previously described doesn't have to be done anymore by the recruiters. Also, the candidates can always answer to us by myapplication@skill.com if they want to access their data, rectify or delete the information. We do this job for our clients, so we provide it ourselves, and we don't leave this on the hands of our recruiters. Also, we have a very high level of security to prevent data loss. That's very important. In case there is a big impact, a data leak in the system, we are ready to provide this information to the EU authorities and the candidates affected, because our system is already prepared in the email automation for that. And lastly, all our controllers and processors that we have, they are subjected to GDPR compliance. So on Skilled, for example, as I gave the example before, we use a personality assessment that comes from America, that it's integrated on our application. And we use a video interview system that also hosts servers in the US. So we have made sure that those vendors of us are also GDPR compliant. So we make sure that customers here in Europe also are protected by the regulation. So these are the main points, the main topics that you need to take into account when assessing your GDPR compliance in recruitment for 2018. And I'm very happy to actually having shared this information with you. If you have any specific questions, we're going to open the floor now. So please, Eric, I'm going to leave you the word now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jose, for that overview of the regulation that's coming on the 25th of May. So it's right around the corner. It's time to think about what are the implications, to analyze your current recruitment process. What are you keeping as a data, how you're keeping it, and how you're gonna put in place all these different consequences of the GDPR. So during the webinar, we had already a few questions coming in. Please, if you have still more questions, write it in the Q&A section of the chat now. We're gonna pick a few questions in 1-2 minutes to answer them. So let's start with the first question. How long can I keep candidate data in my system when I have not hired the candidate? So, basically, with the consent of the candidate, the data can be stored to a very maximum of 2 years. The GDPR does not only imply that the data needs to be deleted after a certain time, but it also implies that it needs to be ensured that the data stored is up to date. And more than 2 years, you cannot for sure guarantee that the data you have is still up to date. 2 years is already quite a lot. So that's why here at Skilled, for example, we agreed on keeping candidate data for a maximum of 12 months with a consent, and then the candidate can renew the consent to stay in the database for a longer time. So I hope that answered the question. Let me check if we have another one. Okay, there's someone asking, how should I notify the candidate about his data still being in the system after a certain time? So I'd say probably the best way to notify your candidates is via email. and give them the choice to either stay in the database or be deleted. And either you can do that manually, which is quite a lot of work to keep track of all the application dates of your candidates. That's why also here at Skilled, we try to automatize that so that we take away the manual work from the recruiters, and the system automatically after 11 months notifies the candidate and gives them basically the choice to renew the consent to stay in the database or to be deleted. This brings me actually to another question. If I have an automated system to notify the candidate when he will be deleted, do I as a recruiter also get the notification? So here I would say this is actually irrelevant, because the right to be forgotten applies anyway for the candidate. And even if the recruiter would get a notification up front, the only action that he could take is to ask the candidate for a renewal of the consent so that he stays in the database. And if you have a system which does that automatically, actually it makes no real difference if you get notified up front or not, because you can't take another action that the system is already taking automatically. So do we have any more questions? Please type them now. Okay, there's another interesting question here. Do you also have to notify candidates outside of the EU about that data? So here, actually the GDPR only applies for EU citizens. And otherwise, for US citizens, for example, there are other data regulations that are in place, but usually they are not that strict and severe as the ones that are coming now with the GDPR. And the EU is actually the only place where we have so strict regulations where you have to pay attention quite a lot to these issues. But if you take it the other way around, on the other hand, if an US company wants to recruit an EU citizen, they are obliged to respect all the GDPR implications and be compliant with their data. So actually, it's also concerning companies and HR departments outside of the EU with international offices, which are also recruiting EU citizens. They also have to update terms and conditions, privacy policy, and make sure to be in line with all the regulations. And
Indeed.
We have
no, and just to just make a little remark there. So what it's clear is that it's the European Union. It's the only region that has imposed such a strong regulation. So even though we are not obliged, let's say, with Skill to do so for candidates outside the European Union, it's still always good to act accordingly to the GDPR, so that the process is standardized and compliant with what the European Union is asking.
Yes, exactly. So let's pick a last question here to wrap this up. We don't want to keep going on too long. I have another question coming in here. What if in my business people apply via email and I manage my applications in an email inbox? That's actually quite dangerous with the GDPR, because when you forward or send attached documents in emails, usually in order to open these documents, you have to download them, and then you have a trace of this personal data on hardware on your computer. And it's going to be very hard to keep track who has downloaded this data, this CV. So sharing and sending CVs attached to an email in PDF or Word form might not be the best choice starting at the 25th of May with the GDPR. That's why probably it's the best choice to have an ATS system which enables you to share CVs within a closed environment so that the data actually never leaves that environment and never is saved on actual hardware on your computer. So I think I answered to most of the questions that could be relevant. So thank you very much for tuning in today and listening to what we have to say about the GDPR. Hopefully your HR department is getting ready in time. And thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in, and hopefully see you soon. Thank you,
Yes,
Jose.
thank you. Thank you very much. Just to mention that the presentation and the slides that we've shared today will come to you at the end. So we'll send you an email. If you have any more specific questions, you can come back to me or Eric for sure. And any specific question on some technical regulation that I mentioned before, also I'm ready to give a hand on there. Okay, so thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you all today, and have a nice evening.
Bye, enjoy.
Bye-bye.